The Canadian housing market is experiencing unprecedented shifts in 2025, and what we're seeing in major cities might surprise you. Today, we're analyzing 10 Canadian markets showing significant cooling trends, price corrections, and emerging challenges that could reshape real estate across the country. Let's examine what's really happening. Number 10. Edmonton, Alberta. Edmonton is showing clear signs of a housing market slowdown that's catching many investors off guard. According to statistics, Canada's latest new housing price index, Edmonton recorded a 1.9% year-to-date price decline through mid-2025, making it one of the few major Canadian cities experiencing consistent downward pressure. Here's what makes Edmonton's situation particularly interesting. Despite Alberta's strong energy sector, the city is grappling with oversupply issues that have been building for months. New construction continues to outpace demand, creating a buyer's market that's forcing sellers to reduce prices or extend listing periods significantly. The emotional impact for Edmonton homeowners is real. Families who purchased at peak prices in late 2023 and early 2024 are now facing negative equity situations. Young professionals who stretched their budgets expecting continued appreciation are finding themselves underwater on mortgages they can barely afford. But here's what most people don't realize about Edmonton's market correction. This isn't just about local supply and demand. The city is experiencing a fundamental shift as remote work reduces the need for proximity to traditional employment centers. Workers can now live anywhere, and many are choosing markets with better lifestyle amenities or lower costs of living. The ripple effects extend beyond individual homeowners. Local businesses dependent on real estate transactions, construction companies, and even municipal tax revenues are feeling the pressure. Property tax assessments based on higher values are creating political tension as homeowners demand reassessments reflecting current market realities. What makes Edmonton's situation even more complex is how it compares to our next city, which is experiencing similar pressures but for completely different reasons. Number 9. London, Ontario. London has emerged as the poster child for rapid market corrections in 2025, with Statistics Canada reporting the fastest year-to-date new home price decline at 2.3% per. This university city, once considered an affordable alternative to Toronto, is now experiencing its own reality check. The transformation in London has been dramatic and swift. Just 2 years ago, buyers from Toronto were driving up prices by offering cash over asking price. Today, those same properties are sitting on the market for months, with sellers reducing prices multiple times to attract offers. Here's where London's story becomes particularly compelling. The city experienced an artificial boom when Toronto buyers sought affordability, but that demand was never sustainable. As interest rates remained elevated and Toronto prices stabilized, the arbitrage opportunity disappeared, leaving London with inflated prices that don't match local economic fundamentals. Think about what this means for different groups of people. Students and young professionals who were priced out during the boom are cautiously optimistic about renewed affordability. But recent buyers, many of whom are young families who stretched financially to enter the market, are facing the harsh reality of declining equity and potential foreclosure pressures. The psychological impact in London is particularly acute because the community isn't accustomed to major market volatility. Unlike Toronto or Vancouver residents who've experienced multiple market cycles, London buyers entered during what they believed was a stable, long-term growth trajectory. Local real estate agents report a fundamental shift in buyer behavior. Instead of competing with multiple offers, buyers are requesting price reductions, extended closing periods, and extensive home inspections. The balance of power has completely shifted, but this transition is creating uncertainty that's paralyzing both buyers and sellers. The situation in London highlights broader questions about market sustainability, but our next city demonstrates how external economic factors can create even more complex challenges. Number 8. Halifax, Nova Scotia. Halifax is experiencing a unique form of market correction that combines declining prices with unprecedented inventory challenges. According to CMHC's Fall 2025 Housing Supply Report, Halifax saw declines across multiple housing categories, but the underlying dynamics reveal a more complex story than simple price drops. What makes Halifax particularly interesting is the disconnect between market fundamentals and price movements. The city continues to attract new residents from other provinces seeking affordability and quality of life, yet prices are declining due to financing constraints and speculative buying pullbacks. Here's the reality that's hitting Halifax hard. The city became a darling of pandemic-era migration, with buyers from Toronto and Vancouver purchasing properties sight unseen based on relative affordability. As those buyers face financial pressure or realize the lifestyle differences don't match expectations, many are trying to exit the market simultaneously. The emotional toll on local Halifax residents is significant. Long-time residents who were excited about increasing property values are now watching their neighborhoods experience high turnover and uncertainty. The sense of community stability that originally attracted newcomers is being undermined by the very market dynamics those newcomers created. Local businesses that expanded to serve the influx of new residents are now facing reduced demand as some buyers return to their original cities or delay moving plans. Restaurant owners, retail operators, and service providers who invested in growth are experiencing the downside of boom-bust cycles. But Halifax's situation also reveals opportunity for those who understand the fundamentals. The city still offers strong employment in healthcare, education, and government sectors. Infrastructure investments continue, and the lifestyle benefits that originally attracted buyers remain unchanged. The question is whether current price corrections create buying opportunities or signal deeper structural problems. The contrast between Halifax's situation and our next city demonstrates how similar market pressures can play out differently depending on local economic conditions. Number 7. Thunder Bay, Ontario. Thunder Bay appeared on the list of cities with significant spring 2025 price declines, representing a northern Ontario market that many investors overlooked until recently. This resource-based economy city is experiencing housing market pressures that reflect broader challenges facing smaller Canadian urban centers. The story of Thunder Bay's housing market reveals the vulnerabilities of resource-dependent communities in a changing economy. Mining sector volatility, combined with an aging population and outmigration of young people, has created a perfect storm for housing market instability. Here's what makes Thunder Bay's situation particularly challenging. The city lacks the economic diversity to absorb housing market shocks the way larger centers can. When resource prices fluctuate or mines reduce operations, the impact on housing demand is immediate and severe. Families dependent on resource sector employment face difficult decisions about whether to stay and ride out downturns or relocate for more stable opportunities. The emotional weight of Thunder Bay's housing challenges extends beyond individual financial losses. This is a community where homeownership has traditionally been achievable for working-class families. When that fundamental promise of stability disappears, it affects community identity and long-term viability. Local government faces impossible choices between maintaining services with declining tax revenues and raising taxes on residents already facing economic pressure. Infrastructure maintenance, community services, and economic development initiatives all compete for limited resources while the tax base shrinks. But Thunder Bay's challenges also highlight the broader question of sustainability for resource-based communities across Canada. Climate change, automation, and global commodity markets are all factors that extend far beyond local housing policy decisions. The lessons from Thunder Bay become even more relevant when we examine our next city, which faces similar structural challenges but in a much larger market. Number 6. Winnipeg, Manitoba. Winnipeg is experiencing a gradual housing market softening that's flying under the radar of national media attention, but creating real impacts for local residents. While not experiencing dramatic price drops like coastal markets, The city faces affordability pressures and inventory challenges that signal potential future problems. What makes Winnipeg's situation unique is the combination of relatively affordable housing with stagnant economic growth. The city hasn't experienced the speculative buying pressure of Toronto or Vancouver, but it also hasn't benefited from the economic dynamism that supports higher housing values in other markets. Here's where Winnipeg's housing challenges become particularly concerning. The city serves as a regional economic center for the prairies, but struggles to retain young professionals and attract investment in growth industries. Without economic diversification and population growth, housing demand remains weak even at current price levels. Young families in Winnipeg face a different set of challenges than those in Toronto or Vancouver. While houses remain relatively affordable, career advancement opportunities are limited, making it difficult to build the income growth necessary to support homeownership and family development goals. The ripple effects of Winnipeg's slow-growth housing market affect community development and municipal planning. Without growing property tax revenues, the city struggles to invest in infrastructure improvements and amenities that could attract new residents and businesses. Local real estate professionals report a market characterized by patience rather than urgency. Buyers know they don't need to rush decisions, which creates more rational pricing but also reduces transaction volume and market dynamism. The challenges facing Winnipeg highlight broader questions about the sustainability of mid-sized Canadian cities in an increasingly concentrated economy. But our next market demonstrates how even strong local economies can't insulate communities from broader housing market pressures. Number 5. Calgary, Alberta. Calgary presents a fascinating case study in housing market complexity, where strong local economic fundamentals clash with broader market uncertainty to create unpredictable conditions. According to recent data, Calgary's average home price reached $615,005 in September 2025, showing moderation after peaking at $650,239 in May. The energy sector recovery that's driving Calgary's economy should theoretically support strong housing demand, but market psychology and financing constraints are creating different dynamics. High-paying jobs are available, but buyers remain cautious about committing to large purchases in an uncertain interest rate environment. Here's what makes Calgary's housing situation particularly interesting for potential buyers and investors. The city offers relatively affordable housing compared to Toronto and Vancouver, strong employment opportunities, and lifestyle benefits that include proximity to the Rocky Mountains and vibrant cultural amenities. But Calgary residents also understand market volatility in ways that residents of other cities don't. The community has experienced multiple boom-bust cycles tied to energy prices, creating a more sophisticated understanding of market risk, but also more cautious approach to major financial decisions. The psychological impact of market uncertainty affects different demographics differently in Calgary. Young professionals attracted by job opportunities struggle with timing homeownership decisions. Established residents with equity built during previous booms are reluctant to trade up or relocate. Retirees worry about market timing for downsizing decisions. Local economists point to Calgary's economic diversification efforts as reasons for long-term optimism, but acknowledge that housing market participants are responding to immediate uncertainty rather than long-term potential. The contrast between Calgary's strong fundamentals and cautious market behavior becomes even more apparent when compared to our next city, which faces similar economic pressures but with higher stakes. Number 4. Hamilton, Burlington, Ontario. The Hamilton-Burlington area represents one of the most dramatic examples of pandemic-era market correction in Canada. This region, once considered Toronto's affordable alternative, is now experiencing the reality check that comes when speculative demand meets economic fundamentals. What happened in Hamilton-Burlington is a textbook example of market overshoot and correction. Buyers fleeing Toronto's high prices drove demand beyond what local employment and economic conditions could support. As remote work policies normalize and Toronto prices stabilize, the premium buyers were willing to pay for Hamilton-Burlington properties has evaporated. Here's the human story behind Hamilton Burlington's housing market challenges. Young families who purchased homes at peak prices expecting continued appreciation are now facing negative equity situations. Many bought based on Toronto salaries, but are discovering that maintaining those income levels while living in Hamilton requires different career strategies than they anticipated. The ripple effects throughout the community are significant. Local businesses that expanded to serve new residents are experiencing reduced demand. Construction companies that ramped up for increased development are cutting back on projects and workforce. Municipal services expanded to accommodate growth are now funded by a smaller tax base than projected. But the Hamilton-Burlington story also reveals resilience and adaptation. Local employers are adjusting salary structures to reflect housing cost changes. Community organizations are developing programs to support residents facing financial pressure. Real estate professionals are helping buyers and sellers navigate a market that's fundamentally different than the one they experienced during the boom years. The long-term implications for Hamilton-Burlington depend partly on how successfully the community can develop economic identity, independent of Toronto overflow demand, but our next city demonstrates how even Canada's largest markets aren't immune to correction pressures. Number 3, Vancouver, British Columbia. Vancouver's housing market is experiencing one of the most significant corrections in recent Canadian history, with Greater Vancouver posting a 6.6% year-over-year price drop as of spring 2025. Within the metro area, some submarkets are seeing even more dramatic declines, with Burnaby East dropping 7% and West Vancouver falling 6%. The scale of Vancouver's market correction reflects the extent of previous overvaluation and the severity of current affordability constraints. Even with price declines, the average home price remains beyond the reach of most local families, creating a market where both buyers and sellers are paralyzed by uncertainty. Here's what makes Vancouver's situation particularly complex. The city continues to attract international investment and immigration, but financing constraints and regulatory changes have reduced speculative demand. Local buyers benefit from improved affordability, but remain cautious about timing major purchases in a declining market. The emotional impact of Vancouver's market correction affects different communities in different ways. Long-time residents who benefited from decades of appreciation are watching paper wealth disappear, but still maintain substantial equity. Recent buyers, particularly those who stretched financially to enter the market, are facing genuine financial hardship as mortgage renewal dates approach. Vancouver's rental market is also experiencing significant changes as investors exit and potential buyers delay purchases. Rental inventory is increasing, providing relief for tenants but creating cash flow challenges for landlords who purchased investment properties at peak prices. The city government faces political pressure to address affordability while managing the fiscal implications of declining property tax assessments. Policy responses that seemed appropriate during the boom now require recalibration for a market experiencing sustained decline. Vancouver's challenges are particularly relevant because they preview what could happen in other major Canadian markets. But our next city demonstrates that even Canada's financial capital isn't immune to market pressures. Number 2, Toronto, Ontario. Toronto's housing market correction represents the most significant shift in Canada's largest real estate market in over a decade. The Greater Toronto Area experienced a 4.2% year-over-year price drop, with the average home price falling from $1,167 to $1,107,463 as of April 2025. What makes Toronto's market correction particularly significant is the city's role as Canada's economic engine. When Toronto's housing market experiences sustained decline, the implications extend far beyond local real estate transactions to affect national economic confidence and policy decisions. Here's the reality that's hitting Toronto residents hard. The city is experiencing decades-high inventory levels according to recent RBC reports, meaning buyers have unprecedented choice, but sellers are competing intensely for attention. For the 10th time in 11 months, average selling prices have declined month over month. The psychological shift in Toronto is profound. Buyers who spent years competing in multiple offer situations are now requesting price reductions and extended negotiation periods. Sellers who expected quick sales at premium prices are learning to adjust expectations and marketing strategies for a fundamentally different market environment. The ripple effects throughout the Greater Toronto Area economy are substantial. Construction employment is declining as developers delay projects due to uncertain demand. Real estate agents, mortgage brokers, and related service providers are experiencing reduced transaction volumes. Municipal governments are reassessing budget projections based on lower property tax growth assumptions. But Toronto's market correction also creates opportunities for residents who were previously priced out. Young professionals, growing families, and downsizing seniors all have more options and negotiating power than they've experienced in years. The long-term implications of Toronto's housing market changes will influence national policy decisions and economic planning. But even more dramatic changes are happening in our number one city. Number 1. Fraser Valley, British Columbia. The Fraser Valley represents perhaps the most dramatic example of pandemic-era housing market correction in Canada. This region, which includes communities like Abbotsford, Chilliwack, local businesses that expanded to serve new residents from Vancouver are experiencing reduced demand, as some buyers return to the city or delay moving plans. School districts that planned for enrollment growth are adjusting projections downward. Municipal services expanded for anticipated population increases are now funded by uncertain tax revenue projections. But the Fraser Valley story also demonstrates community resilience and adaptation. Local employers are exploring ways to attract and retain workers despite housing cost challenges. Community organizations are developing programs to support residents facing financial pressure. Municipal governments are reassessing development policies to encourage sustainable rather than speculative growth. The Fraser Valley's experience provides lessons for other Canadian communities about the risks of rapid market appreciation and the importance of sustainable development policies that serve local residents rather than external investors. So there you have it. 10 Canadian cities experiencing significant housing market cooling in 2025. From Edmonton's oversupply challenges to the Fraser Valley's correction from unsustainable growth, these markets reflect broader economic and social pressures affecting communities across Canada. These market changes represent both challenges and opportunities for Canadian homebuyers, sellers, and communities. What's your take on these housing market trends? Are you seeing similar changes in your local market? If this analysis helped you understand what's happening in Canadian housing markets, make sure to like and subscribe for more real estate market insights and economic analysis.